everyone. In this video, we will walk through how you can activate private AI services on a namespace. This assumes that you have a VCF environment with supervisor enabled, and you actually already have installed private AI services on the supervisor. So where you do that is you go to supervisor management, and under services, you should be able to download the YAML definition file for private AI services from the Broadcom support portal and then add the service here by dropping that file. So here you already see I have private AI services deployed here, so status active. You can follow the official documentations for more details on this step. Now, private AI services is deployed on a namespace basis. You can deploy it on a vSphere namespace. That's great. So private AI services is deployed on a namespace basis. You can deploy it on a vSphere namespace that is created directly on the supervisor using the vSphere client, like here. Or if you have VCF automation in your environment, then you can create a project within a tenant organization and deploy a namespace there, to which then you can also deploy private AI services on that namespace. In this demo, we're just going to go ahead and create a new namespace directly from the vSphere client. So choose your supervisor. We'll create a name, just VB-paste01. We'll add a workload zone here that's available. Review and just finish. We'll wait for it to finish. The namespace now has been deployed. As you can see, it is running and active. Here, before you start, you want to provide some storage policies and VM classes available for this namespace to use. So let's add some storage policy. I'm just going to add some of the vSAN storage policies here. And you can also add some VM classes. So I'm going to add some VM classes that have some GPUs, attached. And I will also add some VM classes that are CPU only for some of our machines. And I think that should be it. You could always add more or remove some VM classes, but just be careful, of course, that you don't remove anything that you are already using later on. So now you can see you have some storage policies available here on this namespace, as well as the VM classes. Now we're ready to deploy private AI services on this namespace. Now, there are some prerequisites that you need in order to activate private AI services. So actually, let's look at the official documentation real quick, where you can see under Activate Private AI Services in a namespace, you will see a lot of the different prerequisites. So for example, you definitely need a PostgreSQL database with pgvector extension installed for private AI services. Another thing I want to point out is private AI services supports any OIDC compliant identity providers. So you definitely want to have this OIDC provider set up correctly to be able to use with private AI services and access its UI. And another thing is if you want to use hardware registry, then you would have to have that set up separately as well. But let's actually go through all of these requirements by looking at the YAML template for the paste configuration. So if you scroll down in the middle like I just did, you'll see the example YAML file. So I'm actually just going to copy all of this and move it to a text editor so we can talk about this. So now I'm in the text editor. I'm just going to copy paste the YAML file I got from the official documentation. Let me blow it up a little bit so you can see better. Now, this is a YAML file for the paste configuration that we need to prepare in order to activate private AI services on the namespace. So this is the API version and the kind, we just leave that as is. There is a name that you can give your paste configuration if you'd like. I'm just going to leave it as is as default. For this annotation, if you want to use FQDN to access your private AI services UI instead of using an external IP address that the load balancer gives you, then you could just uncomment this, but I'm going to leave this as is. Now we're getting into the specs. Now under worker, you should define a storage class name that you want the worker nodes to use. And these worker nodes are for data indexing and retrieval. So I'm going to edit this to say vSAN default storage policy, which is available in this namespace. Now under here, we're looking at some authentication and trust information that you have to provide. So first things are certificates. So depending on the different components that you are configuring with Private AI Services, you have to provide the certificate information so that it has proper access. So for example, you can have a trust bundle for access to the OIDC provider to use with Private AI Services. If you have the hardware registry you want to use and it needs a certificate bundle, you would provide that here. If you have data services manager you're using to deploy or provide your PostgreSQL database for Private AI Services, you can put that here. Now for my setup, I actually just only need one. So for my setup here, I actually don't need all of these separate trust bundles. I just need one, which is actually a config map that you create. So you would have a different file. I just have it already prepared here, but you would provide the API version as v1 kind where you need a config map. And then you would give it a name here that you want to refer back to in your paste configuration and then provide the cert here. So I'm going to provide that trust bundle here, as you can see. Now let's get into database. So here you want to provide the server host name. I'm going to be using a PostgreSQL database deployment through Data Services Manager. So that's what I'm going to put here. So let's go back real quick to my Data Services Manager deployment. As you can see, I already deployed a Postgres database for this instance. So I could copy the instance ID IP here and then take it back to this host. And then I need the username. The username is going to be the admin name here. So this is a PG admin. So we're going to copy that, bring it back over here, copy paste. Now you need the database name. So the database name here is the instance name from DSM. So that's what we're going to use. And I'll put that here. Now you have the password ref. So this is the secret you're going to create where you provide the certificate and the password for this database. So I actually already have that made. So I'm going to show you. I called it PK Postgres 01-secret. So that's the name I'm going to refer to from the paste configuration. This is the namespace in which this secret will be deployed. And then I've got the password to that database. And this is basically what you've set up in DSM. So actually, if you wanted that, you could go back to DSM and you see admin password. You can just copy that to the clipboard and you would paste it back in there. And actually for the certificate too, you can view the certificate from here and then just copy paste that into this secret file that you're creating. So you have this password and string, and then you have the certificate like this. So I will just refer to this secret here. So I'll paste that in here. And then the field path, this is basically the path to that, the field for that password. So here we just called it password. So literally I'm just gonna paste in password. Now we have the database all set up. We're gonna go into the authentication. So the authentication is with the OIDC that you have set up. So depending on which OIDC provider, this issuer URL is going to differ a little bit. I have an Auth Hub instance that I have created in order to use as an OIDC provider for this private AI services. So I'm going to paste in the issuer URL. You get this from your OIDC provider, okay? And here you put the client ID of your OIDC client. Remember, this OIDC client has to be a public client with PKCE enabled, and you have the client ID. And because it's a public client, it does not give you a secret to put in here, right? it uses PKCE. Now, scope, there's OpenID, there's groups. Groups is really how private AI services would limit or control access to different people and different users. So in my case, I do have a group created on this OIDC provider. It's actually called AHPK paste. So I'm going to put that group in here. Now, if you are not using any groups, that's totally okay as well. But this field authorized groups is a required field for paste configuration. So if you're not using groups, just make sure you at least still provide an empty array so that the configuration does not fail. And because I'm using groups, I'm also going to put groups claim and groups on here. One more thing I want to point out is offline access. So Private AI Services UI requires issuing of refresh tokens, and depending on the OIDC server that you use, you might require this offline access scope to be enabled to issue these refresh tokens. But not all of the servers support this scope, so you really should check the official documentation of your OIDC server and make sure that it's supported and enabled for this purpose. So this OIDC part, you're going to have to probably work with whoever is setting up the OIDC client for you and make sure that the OIDC provider side is set up correctly to work with private AI services. Now let's keep moving into the ingress. So you have the load balancer here, and then you have the VKS control plane. So when you configure private AI services on a namespace, it's going to deploy a vSphere Kubernetes service or VKS cluster to run the models especially. So here you basically are defining which VM class and the storage policy that these worker nodes should use. So I'm just going to put a CPU only VM class in here, and I will just use the vSAN default storage again. Now, last things that we need to go over to make sure this paste configuration YAML file is done is regarding NVIDIA. So if you are using GPUs, and especially vGPUs, this is what you're going to need. And so essentially you're providing the NVIDIA license and the NGC access token. So you have to create a config map for the licensing and a secret for your NGC access token. So you can see here, I'll show you, I have a config map created. It's called licensing-config, and it has the client configuration token.talk file in here. So basically this name is what this paste configuration here is referring to. So actually I need to change that to licensing config here, or I could change it the other way, but let's do that. And then we need the token secret. So I have that as well here. I have a secret and a metadata. I just call it ngc-secret, and I have the token in here. So that I will move it, and I'll refer to that secret in this paste configuration file. So this should be it for our paste configuration files, and I will save this. Now we are ready to apply all these files to the namespace. So one thing you have to do before that is in any machine where you have VCF CLI available, that's what you will need to access the namespace. So let me open the terminal. Now we have the terminal open. So if you have VCF CLI installed in your machine already, then you should be able to just type VCF and see the different commands that are available here. So from here, we're going to add the context directly to the supervisor. So you would actually need the supervisor IP address, which you can get from supervisor management, and going to supervisors, and you see the control plane node address 192.135.5 in my case. So make note of that. Go back to the terminal, and we're going to create the context. So it's going to be VCF context create endpoint, and that's going to be the IP address of the supervisor. So 110.192.135.5. We're just going to use a basic auth type. and provide the administrator at vsphere.local username, and then we're gonna skip TLS in this case. Now we're gonna provide a name for the context, so I'm just gonna name it accelerator cluster 1, which is the one I have, and then you have to provide the password, and now you see all of the contexts that are created. So in this sense, if you look, right, this is the name of the overall context, the cluster, and then every namespace that you have on that supervisor is gonna come up here, right? So you can see all of it. Now, when you have to switch into the context that you want, where you want to deploy private AI services, you do VCF context use and choose the context you want to switch to. Now I've switched to Phoebe-Pace01. This is where we want to deploy or activate private AI services. Now, if you look, there's nothing. So if you, for example, do kubectl get pods, there's nothing. Get machines, really nothing. So let's clear this, and we're going to the directory where we have all of our files prepared. So desktop. So as you can see, all of my files are here for the config maps and the secrets and the paste configuration. So you can apply the entire directory at once, or you could apply the files individually. If you're going to do them individually, you have to do config maps and secrets first, since paste configuration depends on those objects being created already. So let's just do one by one. So we're going to do the Broadcom config map, and then NVIDIA one, and then the Postgres secret, and the NGC token. And then now we can apply the paste configuration. And it says created. We can check that actually by doing kubectl get paste configuration. It's still coming up, so you can check actually the pods. And now you can see there are pods pending to come up. So let's give it a little bit while the pods come up, and I can show you what the setup is afterwards. Paste configuration is coming up for this specific namespace, but just to save some time, let me show you what has been deployed in a different namespace and what should come up. So let's switch over to one that already has paste configured. Now, if we go here, you can see if I do pods, for example, you will see some of the agents running and an API pod, an ingress pod. There's some MCP monitor, and there's some other like Rex or data retrieval and indexing worker nodes up and running, etc. So if you actually get kubectl get paste configuration on this one, you will see the name of that paste configuration you gave on that file, and you'll see the service and ready as true and paste available. So this is the state that you want to get to. And if you would like to access the paste UI, you can look at the external IP of the service. So you could do kubectl get services. And from here, you can see the paste ingress default service. And here under external IP, you'll have the IP address that would lead you to the paste UI. So let's open a browser, for example, and let's go to this paste UI. So if you go, you can log in, and this will redirect you to the OIDC provider that has to do the authentication for paste. And if you set that up correctly, you will see the different services available in Private AI Service. So you can see the home overview, and you'll see some knowledge bases where you can add those. You can add data sources if you'd like. You can also see some agents, etc., that you can create, which would use the completions model endpoints that you have running in your namespace. So this is what Private AI Services UI looks like. Now, before we end, actually, let's go back to the vSphere client for a second. And as you can see, where Pace has been activated on a namespace, you will see a VKS cluster that's deployed and a control plane node here and all of the different pod VMs to support the worker nodes and the ingress service, API service, etc. And actually, if you see in PACE 01 where we just deployed or activated Private AI Service, you'll see the different components that are coming up right now. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful.